My parents kicked me out at 18 and said be grateful we fed you. The cardboard box hit the front porch with a dull thud, spilling my belongings across the concrete. My PlayStation controller skittered toward the steps, and I watched 3 years' worth of birthday and Christmas gifts scattered like they meant nothing at all. That's the last of it, my father said, wiping his hands on his khakis like he'd just finished taking out the trash. You're 18 now, Marcus. Time to figure it out. I stared at him through the screen door, my graduation cap still sitting crooked on my head from this morning's ceremony. 12 hours ago, I'd walked across that stage thinking my parents were proud. They'd clapped. My mother had even taken pictures. Now she stood behind my father with her arms crossed, her face carved from stone. Dad, what are you talking about? I got into state. Classes start in August. We talked about this. He shook his head. We talked about you getting a job and moving out. 18 means adult, and adults don't live with their parents. But my acceptance letter. Your acceptance letter, your problem. My mother stepped forward, her voice sharp as broken glass. We've done our job. We fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head for 18 years. Be grateful we did that much. The words hit like a physical blow. Be grateful they fed me. I was their son, not some stray they'd taken pity on. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. I don't understand. The Hendersons are helping Jake with his dorm deposit. Sarah's parents bought her a car for college. I thought. You thought wrong. My father's tone was flat, final. Other people's parents, other people's choices. We don't owe you college. We don't owe you anything. I looked past them into the house, my house, I'd thought, at the leather furniture in the living room, the expensive art on the walls. My father made 6 figures managing the regional bank. My mother worked part-time at a boutique because she wanted to, not because she had to. They drove matching BMWs and took vacation cruises twice a year. Money wasn't the issue. Where am I supposed to go? My mother shrugged. That's not our concern anymore. Mom, please. Just until I save up enough for an apartment. I'll get a job this week, I promise. I'll pay rent. No. She stepped back into the house. Figure it out, Marcus. Build some character. My father started to close the door, then paused. Your phone's on our plan through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own. The door clicked shut with a sound like a coffin closing. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, waiting for them to come back out and tell me this was some kind of twisted joke. A test. Something. Cars drove past on Maple Street like it was any other Tuesday evening. Mrs. Chen next door watered her flowers and pretended not to stare. The sun started setting behind the oak tree I'd climbed as a kid, painting everything golden except for the growing shadow where I stood. Finally, I started picking up my scattered belongings and shoving them back into boxes. My laptop, thankfully, seemed unbroken. My clothes, my books, my entire life reduced to 3 cardboard boxes and a black trash bag. Everything I owned fit in the back of my 2003 Honda Civic, the one I bought myself with money from my part-time job at the grocery store. I had $43 in my wallet and nowhere to go. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Every familiar street felt foreign now, like I was seeing my hometown through different eyes, the eyes of someone who didn't belong anywhere. The gas gauge hovered just above a quarter tank, and I couldn't afford to waste what little I had driving in circles. My first thought was Tyler. We'd been best friends since middle school, and his mom always said I was welcome anytime. But when I pulled into their driveway and saw Mr. Patterson's truck parked sideways across the pavement, I remembered, Tyler's dad had been laid off from the plant last month. They were struggling to keep their own house. I couldn't burden them with this. I tried calling my girlfriend Emma, but it went straight to voicemail. Right, she was at her sister's wedding reception across town. Even if she answered, what was I supposed to say? Hey, want to move in together right after high school graduation? Her parents barely tolerated me as it was. By 9 p.m., I found myself sitting in the parking lot of Mickey's Diner, staring at my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for someone, anyone who might help. My grandparents on my mom's side had died when I was 12. Dad's parents lived in a retirement community in Arizona and barely remembered my name during their annual Christmas calls. There was Uncle Dave, my father's younger brother, but they'd had some falling out years ago over money. Something about a business deal gone wrong. I'd only seen him at a few family gatherings, and even then, my parents made sure the conversation stayed short and cold. I spent the night in my car behind the 24-hour Walmart, dozed fitfully with my seat reclined and my diploma lying crumpled on the passenger floor. Every hour or two, a security guard would circle the parking lot with his flashlight, and I'd pretend to be checking my phone until he moved on. My neck ached, my legs were cramped, and I kept thinking about my bed, my former bed, with its memory foam mattress and the Star Wars sheets I'd been meaning to replace. Wednesday morning, I cleaned up in the Walmart bathroom and spent $4 on a breakfast sandwich from the deli. Then I started job hunting in earnest. I figured if I could land something full-time quickly, I might be able to afford a room somewhere, maybe finish college part-time later. The first 3 places I tried weren't hiring. At Burger Palace, the manager took one look at my hastily ironed shirt and asked why someone with a high school diploma wanted to flip burgers. I need the work, I said simply. He studied me for a moment, then handed me an application. Fill this out. We're always short-handed. Can you start Friday? $15 an hour, 40 hours a week if I was lucky. Before taxes, that was maybe $2,400 a month. I'd need first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit for any apartment. Even a studio in the worst part of town would run $800. I did the math sitting in my car afterward and felt something cold settle in my stomach. I had been academically ranked 15th in my graduating class. I'd had a partial scholarship to state, not a full ride, but enough that with a reasonable contribution from my parents, college would have been manageable. Now I was calculating whether I could afford ramen noodles and still put gas in my car. That night, parked behind a different store, I called my parents one more time. It rang 4 times before my mother picked up. Marcus? Mom, please. Can we just talk about this? The line went dead. When I tried calling back, my number had been blocked. The first month was a blur of grease burns and exhaustion. Burger Palace kept their promise about hours. I was pulling doubles most days, sometimes clocking 50 or 60 hours a week. My hands developed permanent calluses from the grill, and I smelled like French fry oil no matter how much I scrubbed in gas station bathrooms. I'd been sleeping in my car for 3 weeks when Jake found me. Holy shit, Marcus. He knocked on my window at 6 a.m. outside the McDonald's on 4th Street. I'd rotated between 5 different parking spots to avoid drawing attention, but apparently I hadn't been careful enough. I rolled down the window, trying to act casual despite the fact that I was clearly sleeping in a Honda with trash bags for curtains. Hey, man. What's up? Dude, what the hell? Why are you? His eyes went wide as he took in my makeshift living situation. Are you homeless? The word hit like a slap. Homeless. I'd been thinking of it as temporarily displaced or between living situations, but Jake's blunt assessment forced me to face reality. My parents kicked me out, I said quietly. Graduation night. That's insane. Why didn't you call me? I almost laughed. Jake Henderson, whose parents had bought him a brand new Toyota Camry for graduation and were paying his full ride to state. Whose biggest worry was whether to rush a fraternity. How could I explain that some parents just didn't? I didn't want to burden anyone. Burden? Marcus, we're friends. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my mom. You can stay with us until you figure something out. Jake, no. I appreciate it, but don't be stupid. Mom loves you anyway. She always said you were the only friend who actually had manners. Mrs. Henderson picked up on the second ring, and I could hear her voice through the speaker, warm and concerned. By the time Jake finished explaining the situation, I was fighting back tears I couldn't afford to shed. Bring him home right now, she said firmly. I'm making breakfast. The Henderson house smelled like coffee and pancakes and everything I'd lost. Mrs. Henderson took one look at me and wrapped me in a hug that lasted 30 seconds too long. Mr. Henderson, despite being unemployed himself, shook my hand and said I was welcome as long as I needed. We can't offer much, Mrs. Henderson said, setting down a plate piled high with food. The guest room's yours, but we're barely keeping the lights on ourselves. I have a job, I said quickly. I can pay rent. Whatever you think is fair. Absolutely not. Mr. Henderson's voice brooked no argument. You're Jake's friend. That makes you family. I lasted 2 weeks in their kindness before the guilt became unbearable. The breaking point came when I overheard Mrs. Henderson on the phone with the electric company, negotiating a payment extension. She kept her voice low, but the walls were thin, and I caught enough to understand that my presence, another mouth to feed, another body using utilities, was straining their already tight budget. That night, I sat on the guest room bed and opened my laptop. My Burger Palace paychecks were direct deposited now, and I'd managed to save $847 after paying for gas, food, and basic necessities. It wasn't enough for an apartment, but it might cover a room in a boarding house or maybe a weekly motel rate. I was scrolling through Craigslist listings when Jake knocked on my door. You're leaving, aren't you? He leaned against the doorframe, his expression sad but understanding. Your family's amazing, I said. But I can't keep taking advantage. You're not taking advantage of anything. Your dad's looking for work, and I'm eating your food and running up your electric bill. So what's your plan? Back to sleeping in your car? I didn't have a good answer for that. Jake sat down on the bed next to me, staring at my laptop screen filled with sketchy room rentals and weekly motels. There's got to be another option, man. What about your uncle? Dave, right? I remember him from your birthday party a few years ago. My parents hate him. Some business thing went wrong. So. They hate you too, apparently, and you didn't do anything wrong. Jake pulled out his phone. What's his last name? Patterson. But Jake. Same as your dad, genius. He was already typing. David Patterson, holy shit, is this him? I leaned over to look at his screen. Uncle Dave's LinkedIn profile showed him in a sharp business suit, standing in front of some kind of manufacturing facility. The title read, Operations Manager, Hartwell Industries. I think so. He always wore nice suits to family stuff. Dude, Hartwell Industries is huge. They make parts for Boeing. Jake was scrolling through more results. Look, he's got a house in Riverside Heights. Riverside Heights was the expensive part of town, where doctors and lawyers lived. I remembered Uncle Dave being successful, but I'd assumed my parents' hostility meant he was somehow shady or unreliable. I can't just call him out of nowhere. Why not? Worst case, he says no and you're exactly where you are now. That night, after Jake's family had gone to bed, I sat in the backyard with my phone, staring at the number I'd found online. It was nearly 10 p.m., too late to call. But if I waited until tomorrow, I'd lose my nerve. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Dave Patterson. Uncle Dave. It's Marcus. Your nephew. A pause. Marcus. Jesus, kid, how long has it been? 3 years. 4. Something like that. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry to call so late, but I'm in a difficult situation, and I didn't know who else to contact. What kind of difficult situation? The whole story came tumbling out, graduation night, the cardboard boxes, sleeping in my car, the Henderson's kindness, my desperate job search. Uncle Dave listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or disgust. Let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your parents threw you out the day you graduated, told you to be grateful they fed you, and blocked your number when you tried to call back. Yes, sir. And they make what, 6 figures combined? Dad's salary is around $120,000. Mom makes maybe $30,000 part-time. Uncle Dave was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was tight with anger. Your father is a piece of work, Marcus. Always has been. But I never thought he'd pull something like this with his own kid. I know you and Dad had some problems. Our problems are between adults, and they've got nothing to do with you. His tone softened. Where are you staying now? With a friend's family, but they're struggling financially, and I can't keep imposing. You're not imposing on anyone anymore. Can you get to 47 Riverside Drive tomorrow around noon? I scrambled for a pen. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good. We'll figure this out, Marcus. Your parents want to throw away a smart, hardworking kid. Their loss. He paused. And Marcus? Don't call me sir. We're family. After I hung up, I sat in the dark backyard for another hour, feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks, hope. Maybe Uncle Dave would offer me a couch for a few days. Maybe he knew someone who was hiring. Maybe he could loan me enough for a security deposit. I had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. Uncle Dave's house wasn't just in Riverside Heights, it dominated the corner lot like something out of a magazine. 2 stories of red brick and white columns, with a circular driveway and landscaping that probably cost more than most people's cars. I sat in my Honda for 5 minutes, double-checking the address and wondering if I'd made a mistake. The man who answered the door looked like my father, but better. Same dark hair, though Dave's was styled instead of just combed. Same build, but Dave filled out his polo shirt like he actually worked out. When he smiled, it reached his eyes in a way my father's never had. Marcus. He pulled me into a hug before I could offer a handshake. God, you look just like your grandmother. Come in, come in. The inside of the house was even more impressive, hardwood floors, a staircase that curved up to the second floor, and enough space that my parents' entire living room could have fit in just the entryway. But what struck me wasn't the obvious wealth. It was the warmth. Family photos covered the side tables, kids' drawings were magnet to the stainless steel refrigerator, and a golden retriever bounded up to sniff my shoes. That's Buster, Dave said, scratching behind the dog's ears. Fair warning, he thinks everyone exists solely to throw his tennis ball. A woman emerged from what looked like a home office, attractive and professional looking, probably in her early 40s. You must be Marcus. I'm Jennifer, Dave's wife. She shook my hand firmly. I've heard a lot about you over the years. That surprised me. You have. Dave talks about his brother's family sometimes. Her expression grew serious. Though after yesterday's conversation, I don't think he'll be doing much of that anymore. Dave gestured toward a leather couch that probably cost more than my car. Sit. We need to talk. I perched on the edge, suddenly aware of my Burger Palace uniform and the faint smell of fryer oil that seemed permanently embedded in my clothes. I really appreciate you taking the time to see me, Uncle Dave. I know this is awkward, with everything between you and Dad. Let me tell you about everything between me and your dad. Dave settled into the chair across from me, his expression hardening. 5 years ago, I offered to go into business with him. A small investment firm, nothing fancy. I had the startup capital, he had the banking connections. 50-50 partnership. Jennifer sat down beside him, her hand resting on his arm like she'd heard this story before and knew where it led. 2 months in, I discovered he'd been skimming money from our operating account. Not just a little, nearly $40,000. When I confronted him, he claimed it was a temporary loan for some investment opportunity. Turned out he'd blown it on a fishing boat. My stomach dropped. A fishing boat? 26-foot Sea Ray. He still takes it out on the weekends. Dave's jaw tightened. When I demanded he return the money, he told me I was greedy and ungrateful. Said he'd done me a favor by letting me invest in the first place. I thought about my father's words graduation night. Be grateful we fed you. Apparently, gratitude was his favorite weapon. The business failed without that capital. I lost my initial investment, plus another $15,000 trying to keep it afloat. Dave leaned forward. But you know what the worst part was? He never apologized. Never even acknowledged that what he did was wrong. When I told him our partnership was over, he said I was being dramatic. I had no idea, I said quietly. Of course you didn't. Your father's very good at controlling the narrative. Dave's expression softened. But here's what I want you to understand, Marcus, none of that has anything to do with you. You were 13 when all this happened. You're his son, not his business partner. Jennifer spoke up. Dave's been wanting to reach out for years. He was worried about you, especially after we heard about your parents' attitude toward college. You knew about that? Dave nodded grimly. Your father made some comments at your cousin Linda's wedding last year. About how kids today expect everything handed to them, how character builds through struggle. Jennifer and I left that reception very concerned about what would happen when you graduated. I stared at them both. You saw this coming. We suspected something like this might happen, Jennifer said gently. Your parents have a very transactional view of relationships. Everything's about what people owe them, what they deserve, what they've earned. Dave stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his perfectly manicured lawn. I've spent 5 years angry at my brother for what he did to me. But throwing out his own kid? He turned back to me. That's not just morally wrong, Marcus. It's stupid. Do you know what your GPA was? 3.7. And your SAT scores? 1340. You had a partial scholarship to state, you've been working since you were 16, and you've never been in trouble a day in your life. Dave's voice was rising slightly. Most parents would be fighting each other for the privilege of helping a kid like you succeed. The emotion in his voice caught me off guard. This man barely knew me, yet he seemed more invested in my future than my own father had ever been. Which brings me to why you're here, Dave continued. Jennifer and I have a proposition for you. The words hung in the air like a lifeline I was afraid to grab. I looked between Uncle Dave and Jennifer, trying to read their expressions, wondering what kind of proposition they could possibly have for someone in my situation. First, Dave said, settling back into his chair, you need to know that we don't have kids of our own. We tried for years, went through fertility treatments, the whole 9 yards. It just wasn't in the cards for us. Jennifer picked up where he left off. We've talked about mentoring or maybe setting up scholarships, but we never found the right opportunity. Then Dave told me about your situation last night, and we realized, here's a deserving kid who needs exactly the kind of help we've been wanting to give. My heart started beating faster. What kind of help? Dave pulled out a folder from the side table and opened it on his lap. I made some calls this morning. State University's fall semester starts August 23rd. That's 7 weeks away. Your partial scholarship is still valid if you accept by July 15th, that's 12 days from now. Uncle Dave, I can't afford. He held up a hand. Let me finish. Tuition, room, board, books, everything you'd need for 4 years at state comes to roughly $84,000. Your scholarship covers $32,000 of that, which leaves $52,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $52,000 might as well have been $50 million. Jennifer and I want to pay for the rest. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. What? We want to fund your education. All 4 years, everything your scholarship doesn't cover. No strings attached, no interest, no repayment required. The room started spinning slightly. Uncle Dave, I can't let you do that. That's an incredible amount of money. It's less than I paid for Jennifer's BMW, he said matter-of-factly. And considerably less than your father stole from me, if we're keeping track. Jennifer leaned forward. Marcus, Dave makes $340,000 a year. We live well, but we're not extravagant people. We've been saving for years without a clear purpose. This would give that money meaning. But you barely know me, I said, my voice cracking slightly. What if I flunk out? What if I change majors 6 times? What if you succeed beyond anyone's expectations? Dave interrupted. What if you graduate with honors and land an amazing job? What if you become the kind of person who helps other kids in situations like this? He smiled. Those seem like much better possibilities to bet on. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. Why would you do this for me? Because someone should, Jennifer said simply. Because you're 18 years old and you deserve a chance. Because your parents threw away something precious, and we're not going to let their mistake ruin your future. Dave closed the folder and set it aside. But there's a second part to this proposition, and it's not negotiable. My stomach clenched. Here was the catch, the strings attached. You quit Burger Palace immediately. You move into our guest room, permanently, not just for a few weeks. You focus entirely on preparing for college. Study for placement exams, research your major, maybe take a summer class to get ahead. I need the job, I protested. I can't live off your charity while. It's not charity, Dave said firmly. It's an investment. And part of protecting that investment means making sure you're not burning yourself out flipping burgers when you should be preparing for your future. Jennifer stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, pulling down a thick binder. I was pre-med at Northwestern. I know what it takes to succeed in college, especially when you're starting from behind. Working 60-hour weeks at a fast food job isn't going to help you. But I'll need spending money, basic supplies. We'll provide a monthly allowance, Dave said. Nothing extravagant, but enough that you can focus on your studies without worrying about whether you can afford toothpaste. I sat there trying to process what they were offering. It was everything I'd lost on graduation night and more. A home, a family that actually wanted me around, financial security, and the chance to pursue the future I'd planned before my world imploded. There's one more thing, Dave added, his expression growing serious. Your parents can't know about this arrangement. Not yet. What do you mean? I mean when your father finds out I'm helping you, and he will eventually, he's going to lose his mind. He'll probably call you ungrateful, say you're being manipulated, try to convince you that I have ulterior motives. Dave's voice hardened. I won't have him poisoning this opportunity with his toxicity. When you're ready to deal with him, that's your choice. But not while you're trying to build your foundation. The weight of their offer was overwhelming. 6 hours ago, I'd been worried about affording ramen noodles. Now they were talking about college funds and monthly allowances and treating me like I was worth investing in. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Jennifer said gently. Let us help you, Marcus. Let us show you what family is supposed to look like. I said yes, of course. What else could I do? But as Uncle Dave and Jennifer showed me to what would be my room, a space twice the size of my old bedroom, with its own bathroom and a desk that looked like it belonged in a corporate office, I kept waiting for reality to crash back down. The crash came 3 days later, but not in the way I expected. I just finished my last shift at Burger Palace, enduring Mike the manager's lecture about kids today having no work ethic, when I quit with only 2 days' notice. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car, still smelling like fryer oil for the last time. Emma's name lit up the screen. I'd been avoiding her calls since graduation night, too ashamed to explain why I'd basically vanished from her life. Marcus? Thank God you finally picked up. Where have you been? It's complicated, I said, fumbling with my keys. How was your sister's wedding? Forget the wedding. Tyler told me what happened with your parents. Why didn't you call me? I leaned against my Honda, watching the evening shift workers trudge into Burger Palace. A week ago, that had been my life. I didn't want to drag you into it. Drag me into what? Your girlfriend caring about you. Her voice was sharp with hurt. I've been calling for days. I thought something terrible happened. Something terrible did happen. So why are you shutting me out? We're supposed to be figuring out our future together, remember? State University, finding an apartment near campus. She paused. You're still planning on college, right? The lie came easier than it should have. Yeah, of course. Just dealing with some family stuff. Good, because I've been looking at apartments online. There's this cute one-bedroom about 10 minutes from campus, $1,200 a month. If we split it, that's only $600 each, plus utilities. My stomach dropped. $600 a month was more than I'd made in my best week at Burger Palace. Before Uncle Dave's offer, it would have been impossible. But now, with his monthly allowance, it was theoretically affordable. The problem was explaining how. Emma, I need to tell you something. Oh, also, my dad talked to someone at his accounting firm. They might have a paid internship available sophomore year. Isn't that amazing? We could both be making real money by the time we're 20. Her excitement was infectious and heartbreaking at the same time. She was planning a future that included both of us, while I was living in a completely different reality now. How could I explain that I'd been homeless, that her boyfriend was surviving on the charity of an uncle she'd never met? That sounds great, I managed. I know you're stressed about money. My parents said they might be able to help with a security deposit if your parents are being weird about it. She lowered her voice. Mom thinks your dad is having some kind of midlife crisis. She said he was acting strange at graduation, barely talking to anyone. If only it were that simple. He's definitely going through something. Well, whatever. Parents are crazy sometimes. The important thing is we stick together, right? You and me against the world. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the car window. Right. After we hung up, I sat in the Burger Palace parking lot for 20 minutes, watching my former coworkers through the windows. Emma's call had highlighted something I'd been trying not to think about. Accepting Uncle Dave's help meant lying to everyone else in my life. How could I explain to my friends that while their parents were struggling to pay for their college, I had a secret benefactor funding everything? How could I tell Emma I was living in a mansion in Riverside Heights when she thought I was dealing with family stuff at home? When I finally made it back to Uncle Dave's house, I couldn't bring myself to call it home yet. Jennifer was in the kitchen making dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air, and I realized I'd grown used to the constant background scent of industrial food service. How was your last day? She asked, not looking up from the stove. Fine. Weird. I sat down at the kitchen island, watching her work. Can I ask you something? Of course. Don't you think this is all happening too fast? A week ago, you didn't even know I existed. Now you're paying for my college and letting me live in your house. Jennifer set down her wooden spoon and turned to face me. Do you want to know the truth? Always. Dave's been talking about you for years. Wondering how you were doing, whether you were happy, if your parents were treating you right. She leaned against the counter. When Linda got married last spring, Dave came home furious. He said your father spent the entire reception complaining about entitled kids and how his son better not expect any handouts after graduation. He was talking about me at a wedding. That's when we started discussing what we'd do if something like this happened. We've had months to think about this decision, Marcus. It's not impulsive. Before I could respond, Dave walked in from his home office, loosening his tie. How'd the manager take your resignation? About as well as you'd expect. I hesitated. I got a call from my girlfriend today. She's making plans for us to get an apartment near campus. Dave and Jennifer exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. That's normal, Jennifer said carefully. You're 18. Most couples your age think they're going to stay together through college. The thing is, she doesn't know about any of this. About you guys helping me, about what my parents did. She still thinks I'm living at home dealing with normal family drama. Dave pulled a beer from the refrigerator and popped it open. What are you thinking of telling her? I don't know. That's the problem. The conversation with Emma kept eating at me over the next few days. Every text she sent about apartment hunting or course registration felt like another layer of deception I'd have to maintain. By Friday, I convinced myself that honesty was the only way forward. I asked her to meet me at Riverside Park, the same place where we'd had our first official date 2 years ago. She arrived wearing the sundress I'd complimented at graduation, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than 18. You've been so mysterious lately, she said, settling onto the picnic table bench beside me. I was starting to think you were planning to break up with me. It's not that. I took a deep breath, watching a family of ducks paddle across the pond. Emma, some things have happened that I need to tell you about. Her smile faded. What kind of things? So I told her. Everything. My parents kicking me out, sleeping in my car, the Hendersons taking me in, Uncle Dave's incredible offer. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to something that looked almost like hurt. Wait, she said when I finished. So you've been living in Riverside Heights this whole time? While I've been worried sick about you. I know I should have called. Marcus, I drove past your house 3 times this week. I was going to knock on the door, but I didn't want to make things worse with your parents. Her voice was rising. Your car wasn't there because you weren't there. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to explain it. How about starting with the truth? She stood up, pacing a few steps away. God, I feel so stupid. I've been researching financial aid options, looking for scholarships you might have missed. I even asked my dad about that internship because I thought you needed the money. I did need help. I do need help. No, you don't. She turned back to me, and I could see tears forming. You have a rich uncle paying for everything. You're living in a mansion. You probably have more money now than my family does. It's not like that. Isn't it? Marcus, my parents are taking out a second mortgage to help pay for my college. My mom's been working double shifts at the hospital to save up for my textbooks. Her voice cracked. And here I am, trying to figure out how we can afford a 1-bedroom apartment, while you're getting monthly allowances from people who drive BMWs. I wanted to argue, to explain that a week ago I'd been homeless and terrified, that this wasn't something I'd asked for or expected. But looking at Emma's face, I realized how it must seem from her perspective. I didn't ask for any of this, I said quietly. But you took it. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Which I understand, okay. I'm not saying you shouldn't have. But the lying, Marcus, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? Because I knew you'd react like this. Wrong answer. Her face went cold in a way I'd never seen before. React like what? Like someone who's been honest with you about everything. Like someone who's been planning our future together while you've been living a completely different life. Emma, please. I need some time to think about this. She was already walking toward her car. About what it means that your first instinct was to lie to me. About whether the person I thought I was dating actually exists. I watched her drive away, my chest tight with the realization that Uncle Dave's generosity might cost me the one relationship that had made my parents' rejection bearable. When I got back to Riverside Heights, Dave took one look at my face and poured 2 glasses of bourbon. Want to talk about it? I told him about Emma's reaction, about the hurt in her voice, about how my attempts at honesty had somehow made everything worse. Dave was quiet for a long moment. Your girlfriend's not wrong, you know. Money changes everything, even when you don't want it to. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already understood. Dave swirled his bourbon, staring into the amber liquid. I mean that money is never just money. It's power, it's freedom, it's security, but it's also obligation and guilt and resentment. He looked up at me. Your girlfriend spent this week worrying about you, trying to help someone she thought was struggling. Now she finds out you've been living better than she is while she was losing sleep over your problems. But I was struggling. A week ago I was homeless. And now you're not. Now you're the kid whose rich uncle swooped in to save the day. Dave's voice wasn't unkind, but it was matter of fact. Emma's going to spend the next 4 years watching her parents sacrifice for her education while you coast on someone else's generosity. That's going to create distance whether you want it to or not. The bourbon burned my throat. So what am I supposed to do? Give back the money? Go sleep in my car again? Of course not. But you need to understand that accepting help like this comes with consequences beyond just college tuition. Dave leaned forward. I've been wealthy for 15 years now, Marcus. I've watched friendships change, seen people treat me differently once they knew my net worth. Money doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. I don't feel any different. Give it time. He finished his drink and set the glass down with a decisive clink. But here's what I want you to remember when things get complicated. Your parents threw you away like garbage. They told their own son to be grateful they fed him. Whatever challenges come from accepting my help, they're nothing compared to what would have happened if you tried to do this alone. That night, lying in my comfortable bed in my spacious room, I thought about Dave's words. Through my window, I could see the landscaped backyard with its pool and outdoor kitchen. Down the hall, Dave and Jennifer were probably watching Netflix on their 70-inch TV, not worrying about electric bills or grocery money or whether they could afford new tires. This was my life now. But it didn't feel like mine yet. Saturday morning brought an unexpected complication. I was eating breakfast when Dave's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his expression darkened. Your father, he said simply, showing me the screen. My stomach dropped. How did he get your number? It's not exactly classified information. Dave declined the call. The question is why he's calling now. The phone immediately started ringing again. Then again. Should you answer it? Jennifer asked. On the 4th call, Dave finally picked up. What do you want, Robert? Even from across the kitchen, I could hear my father's voice, tight with anger. I want to know why my son's car was parked in your driveway last night. My blood went cold. Someone had seen my Honda and reported back to my parents. Maybe you should ask your son, Dave replied coolly. Oh wait, you can't. You kicked him out and blocked his number. Don't play games with me, Dave. What kind of poison are you filling his head with? The kind where adults don't abandon their children for sport. The line went quiet for a moment. Then my father's voice came back, louder now. Marcus is learning responsibility. Building character. Something you never understood. Character. Dave's voice rose. You threw an honor student into the street with $40 and called it character building? I gestured frantically for Dave to hand me the phone. After a moment's hesitation, he did. Dad? Marcus. My father's tone shifted, becoming almost reasonable. Son, I think there's been some confusion. Your uncle has a history of manipulating family situations for his own benefit. Whatever he's told you. He didn't tell me anything. You did. Graduation night. When you put my belongings in boxes and told me to be grateful you fed me. Silence. Come home, my father said finally. We can discuss this rationally. So you can kick me out again. No thanks. Marcus, your uncle stole from me. Did he mention that? $40,000. Now he's using you to get back at me. I looked at Dave, who was shaking his head grimly. Actually, Dad, he told me all about your business partnership. How you took money from the company account to buy a boat. My voice was steadier than I felt. Funny how your version is different. Another long pause. When my father spoke again, his reasonable tone was gone. You have 1 week to come home, Marcus. After that, don't expect any relationship with this family. The line went dead. I stared at the dead phone in my hand, my father's ultimatum echoing in my head. 1 week. 7 days to choose between the family that had thrown me away and the uncle who'd saved me. Well, Dave said, taking the phone back, that went about as well as expected. Jennifer looked between us, concern etched on her face. He's bluffing, right? What relationship is he threatening to cut off? They already kicked Marcus out. He means the extended family, Dave explained grimly. Cousins, aunts, uncles on both sides. Robert's very good at controlling narratives, making himself the victim. By next weekend, half the family will believe Marcus abandoned his loving parents to live with his manipulative uncle. My chest tightened. Cousin Linda's wedding is next month. And Aunt Sarah's birthday party. Which you'll now be uninvited to, Dave said matter-of-factly. Your father will make sure of that. The weight of it hit me all at once. I'd already lost my parents, my home, and possibly Emma. Now I was about to lose everyone else too, grandparents, cousins, family friends who'd known me since I was a kid. Maybe I should go back, I said quietly. Just to keep the peace. Figure out some compromise. Absolutely not. Dave's voice was sharp. Marcus, listen to me very carefully. Your father just showed you exactly who he is. He didn't apologize for kicking you out. He didn't ask if you were safe or where you'd been sleeping. The first words out of his mouth were accusations and ultimatums. But the family. The family, Jennifer interrupted gently, let an 18-year-old become homeless without anyone checking on him. Where were all these relatives when you were sleeping in your car? She had a point. My phone hadn't exactly been ringing with offers of help. Your father's counting on you being afraid of losing people, Dave continued. It's emotional blackmail, pure and simple. And if it works, he'll use it every time he wants to control you. I slumped against the kitchen counter, feeling the walls of my new life closing in. So what do I do? You do nothing, Dave said firmly. You let him make his calls and spread his version of events. The people who matter will figure out the truth eventually. The ones who don't, well, you'll know where you stand with them. What if everyone believes him? Dave walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Then you'll build a new family. Better people who actually give a damn about your well-being. That afternoon, the calls started. First Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, her voice cold and disappointed. Marcus, honey, your father says you've been very disrespectful. Running off, not answering calls. Maybe it's time to come home and apologize. I tried to explain what really happened, but she cut me off. Your Uncle Dave has always been a troublemaker. Don't let him turn you against your parents. Then Cousin Mike called, my father's brother's son, someone I'd always considered a friend. Dude, what the hell? Uncle Robert says you just disappeared after graduation. Your mom's been crying for weeks. Mike, they kicked me out. That's not what they said. They said you had some big fight and stormed off. Very dramatic, very teenage. His tone was annoying, like he was talking to a child. Look, we've all had fights with our parents. Time to grow up and go home. By evening, I'd received 6 calls, 3 texts, and 2 Facebook messages. Every single conversation followed the same pattern, concern, disappointment, and gentle pressure to return home and make peace. Not one person asked what the fight was about or whether I was safe. It's like they're reading from a script, I told Dave and Jennifer over dinner. They probably are, Dave replied. Your father's had all day to craft his story and make his calls. By now, the official version is that you're a rebellious teenager acting out, and I'm the villain manipulating you for revenge. The thing that gets me, I said, pushing food around my plate, is how easily everyone believed it. Nobody thought to call me directly until today. Nobody wondered why my car hadn't been at the house for 2 weeks. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It says more about them than it does about you. My phone buzzed with another text. This one from Grandpa Patterson, my father's dad, asterisk very disappointed in you, Marcus. Your father has been nothing but generous. Time to stop this nonsense, asterisk. I showed the message to Dave, whose jaw tightened. My own father. 40 years of watching Robert manipulate every situation, and he still falls for it. What if they're right? The words came out before I could stop them. What if I am being ungrateful? What if normal families really do kick their kids out at 18, and I'm just being dramatic? Dave set down his fork and looked at me seriously. Marcus, I want you to call Tyler Henderson. Right now. Ask him if his parents are planning to kick him out on his birthday next month. I knew the answer without calling. The Hendersons had been frantically saving money to help Tyler with college expenses even while Mr. Henderson was unemployed. Then call Emma's parents. Ask them if they think feeding your child for 18 years makes them even. Emma's mom had literally cried at her graduation, talking about how proud she was and how excited she was to see what Emma would accomplish in college. Normal parents don't abandon their children the day they graduate, Dave continued. Normal parents don't tell their kids to be grateful for basic necessities. Normal parents don't block their children's phone numbers. He was right, but that didn't make the family pressure any easier to handle. By the time I went to bed, my phone had 17 unread messages, all variations on the same theme, disappointment, manipulation disguised as concern, and demands that I stop embarrassing the family. The last message, from my father, was simple, 6 days left. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was what freedom was supposed to feel like. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang, followed by the sound of Dave's surprised voice at the front door. Well, this is unexpected. Please, come in. I peered around the corner and froze. My mother stood in the entryway, looking smaller than I remembered. She wore her best church dress, navy blue with pearl buttons, and clutched her purse like a shield. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. Hello, Marcus, she said when she spotted me. Mom. The word felt foreign in my mouth. What are you doing here? I came to see you. To talk. She glanced around Dave's house, taking in the expensive furnishings with obvious discomfort. This is quite a place your uncle has. Dave appeared beside me, his expression carefully neutral. Can I offer you some coffee, Linda? No, thank you. She looked directly at me. Marcus, could we speak privately? Jennifer emerged from her office, assessed the situation quickly, and touched Dave's arm. We'll be in the backyard if you need anything, she said meaningfully. Once we were alone, my mother perched on the edge of the leather sofa like she was afraid of contaminating it. You look good, she said quietly. Healthy. Thanks. I remained standing, unwilling to get comfortable. Your father doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm at my book club. She opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. I brought your baby pictures. And your report cards from elementary school. I thought you might want them. The gesture caught me off guard. Why? Because they're yours. Because I've been going through your room, your old room, and I found things that belong to you. Her voice wavered slightly. Things a mother saves. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Mom, if you're here to convince me to come home. I'm not. The words came out in a rush. I'm here to apologize. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. I stared at my mother, certain I'd misheard. You're what? I'm sorry, Marcus. For graduation night. For the things we said. For. She gestured helplessly around Dave's living room. For all of this. I sank into the chair across from her, legs suddenly unsteady. Then why did you do it? My mother was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. Your father has very strong opinions about character and independence. He grew up poor, did you know that? His father left when he was 12. His mother worked 3 jobs. That doesn't excuse. I know it doesn't. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. But it explains it, maybe. He's always been terrified that you'd grow up soft, entitled. He thought college would make you dependent. So you both decided to make me homeless instead. I went along with it because I was a coward. Her voice broke slightly. Because it was easier to support your father than to fight him. Because I told myself it would only be for a few days, just long enough to scare you into appreciating what you had. My chest tightened. A few days. I thought you'd come back after a night or 2. Apologetic, grateful. Your father would lecture you about responsibility, you'd promise to get a job and pay rent, and everything would go back to normal. She wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. I never imagined you'd just disappear. I didn't disappear. You blocked my number. Your father blocked your number. I wanted to call you back, but he said it would undermine the lesson. She laughed bitterly. Some lesson. I drove by every place I could think of for a week, looking for your car. The admission stunned me. You were looking for me. Of course I was looking for you. You're my son. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. When Mrs. Chen mentioned seeing you at the Henderson place, I was so relieved I almost collapsed. At least you were safe. Then why didn't you come get me? Because your father said the Hendersons would enable you, that you'd learn more from struggling. And because. She took a shaky breath. Because I was ashamed. How do you apologize for something like that? How do you explain to your child that you chose your marriage over their well-being? The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother had just admitted what I'd suspected but never wanted to believe, that when forced to choose between her husband and her child, she'd chosen him. Mom, I spent 3 weeks sleeping in my car. 3 weeks. My voice was steadier than I felt. I ate gas station sandwiches and showered in Walmart bathrooms. I thought about calling you every single night, but I couldn't because you blocked my number. I know. God, Marcus, I know. She was crying openly now. I've barely slept since graduation. Every night I lie awake thinking about you out there, scared and alone, while we were in our comfortable bed pretending we'd done the right thing. Then why didn't you do something about it? Because I'm weak. The admission came out like a confession. Because your father convinced me that calling you would be enabling your irresponsibility. Because I've spent 23 years of marriage avoiding conflict, and I didn't know how to start now. I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me but apparently never fought for me when it mattered. What changed? Why are you here today? Linda's wedding. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Yesterday at the reception, I was talking to your Aunt Carol about college expenses for her kids. She mentioned spending $1,200 on textbooks alone, and I realized. Her voice trailed off. Realized what? That normal parents help their children. That what we did isn't tough love, it's abandonment. She looked around Dave's living room again. Your uncle told your father some hard truths on the phone yesterday. About what kind of parents throw their child into the street. It made me face what I'd been avoiding. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and saw Emma's name, asterisk can we talk? I've been thinking about everything, asterisk. Mom noticed my distraction. Is that your girlfriend? Emily. Emma. And I don't know if she's still my girlfriend. I showed her the message. Finding out about Uncle Dave's help didn't go over well. She thinks I've been lying to her. Have you been? The directness of the question surprised me. Not intentionally. But I haven't been completely honest either. Mom nodded slowly. Money complicates everything, doesn't it? Even when it's helping you. Before I could respond, Dave appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but Marcus, you have another visitor. My stomach dropped, expecting to see my father's car in the driveway. Instead, Emma stood behind Dave, looking nervous and determined. I hope it's okay that I came by, she said, glancing between me and my mother. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond my ability to manage. My mother, who'd just admitted to choosing her husband over her son. My girlfriend, who discovered I'd been lying by omission for 2 weeks. All of them standing in my uncle's living room, where I was living on borrowed generosity while my entire previous life fell apart. Maybe I should go, Mom said, starting to stand. No, Emma said quickly. I mean, if you're Marcus's mom, I'd like to meet you properly. I'm Emma. She extended her hand with that natural confidence I'd always admired. Mom shook her hand, managing a weak smile. Linda. Marcus has mentioned you many times. Mrs. Patterson. Emma's brow furrowed. Wait, Marcus said your parents kicked him out. But you're here, so. She looked at me with growing confusion. What exactly is going on? I looked between the 2 most important women in my life, both waiting for explanations I wasn't sure how to give. In the span of 10 minutes, my carefully compartmentalized world had completely collapsed. It's complicated, I said weakly, the same phrase I'd been using for 2 weeks to avoid difficult conversations. Emma's expression hardened slightly. Everything seems to be complicated with you lately, Marcus. Maybe it's time for some simple, honest answers. I stood in Uncle Dave's living room, feeling like I was at the center of a collision I'd been trying to avoid for weeks. My mother sat on a leather sofa, tissues clutched in her hand, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Emma stood near the doorway, her arms crossed, waiting for the honest answers I'd been dodging since graduation night. You want simple answers? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Fine. Mom, tell Emma what you and Dad did to me graduation night. My mother's face went pale. Marcus. No, she wants honesty. Let's be honest. I turned to Emma. My parents threw me out of the house 12 hours after I graduated. Packed my stuff in cardboard boxes, told me to be grateful they fed me for 18 years, and said I was on my own. Emma's mouth fell open. What? I spent 3 weeks sleeping in my car before Tyler's family took me in, I continued, the words pouring out now. Then Uncle Dave offered to pay for my entire college education and let me live here. That's why I've been complicated lately. Because my girlfriend is worried about splitting a $1,200 apartment while I'm living in a mansion, funded by someone who makes more in a month than most families see in a year. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stared at my mother like she was looking at an alien species. You threw him out. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. The day he graduated. Mom's composure finally cracked completely. We thought it would teach him responsibility. We thought he'd come back in a few days, more grateful, more mature. She looked at me with desperate eyes. We never meant for it to go this far. But you blocked his phone number, Emma said, her teacher voice kicking in, the same tone she used when she tutored kids who weren't telling the truth. Robert blocked his number. I wanted to call. But you didn't. Emma's words cut like a blade. You let your 18-year-old son become homeless rather than stand up to your husband. I watched my mother flinch as if she'd been slapped. It wasn't that simple. Yes, it was. Emma moved closer, and I could see she was shaking with anger. It was exactly that simple. Your child or your marriage. You chose your marriage. Dave appeared in the doorway, probably drawn by the raised voices. He took one look at the scene and started to back away, but I caught his eye. Uncle Dave, Emma wants to understand the whole situation. Maybe you could explain what kind of parents my mom and dad really are. Dave's expression was carefully neutral. Marcus, that's not my place. Tell her about the boat, I said, my voice harder now. Tell her about the $40,000 my father stole from you, then used to buy a fishing boat while claiming I needed to build character through struggle. My mother's head snapped up. What boat? What $40,000? The confusion in her voice was genuine. She had no idea about my father's theft, about the business partnership that had gone wrong, about any of it. I realized that my mother wasn't just a coward, she was also being manipulated by my father, just like everyone else. Dave looked at Mom with something that might have been pity. Linda, there's quite a lot about your husband that you don't know. Emma was watching this family drama unfold with the fascination of someone seeing a completely different world. Mrs. Patterson, did you really not know why Marcus's father and uncle don't speak to each other? I knew they had some business disagreement, Mom said weakly. Robert said Dave was jealous of his success. Dave laughed, but there was no humor in it. Success. Is that what he called stealing from his own brother? The color drained from my mother's face as the implications hit her. Her husband hadn't just abandoned their son, he'd stolen from family, then painted himself as the victim when consequences followed. Emma looked between all of us, then focused on me. Marcus, I owe you an apology. A huge one. Emma, you don't. Yes, I do. I accused you of lying when you were protecting everyone's feelings. I got angry about you having advantages when you've been literally homeless. She ran her hands through her hair. I was jealous and petty, and I'm sorry. Before I could respond, my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen, and everyone in the room went quiet. 5 days left, I said, showing them the caller ID. Should I answer it? Dave shook his head. Not until you decide what you want to say to him. And not until your mother decides what she's going to do about what she just learned. All eyes turned to my mother, who sat there holding my baby pictures and looking like her entire world was crumbling. Which, I realized, it probably was. My mother sat there for a full minute, staring at the envelope of baby pictures in her lap like they held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. Finally, she looked up at Dave with something that might have been steel in her voice. Tell me about the boat. Dave glanced at me, then at Emma, clearly weighing how much family dirty laundry to air in front of my girlfriend. But I was done with secrets and half-truths. Tell her everything, Uncle Dave. She deserves to know what kind of man she's been married to. So Dave told her. About the investment firm they'd planned to start together 5 years ago. About discovering the missing $40,000 from their operating account. About confronting my father only to be told it was a temporary loan for a can't-miss opportunity. A 2019 Sea Ray 260 Sundancer, Dave said, his voice flat with old anger. 26 feet of pure ego. He bought it the same week I was scrambling to cover payroll for our 3 employees. My mother's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and finally, a terrible understanding. The boat he said his friend was selling cheap. The one he claimed he got for $15,000. Try $47,000, Dave replied. Plus another $8,000 in accessories and registration fees. But he told me. Mom's voice trailed off as the math became clear. The cheap boat story had been just another lie in what I was beginning to realize was probably a decades-long pattern. Emma, who had been following this conversation like a tennis match, finally spoke up. Mrs. Patterson, how long has your husband been lying to you? It was a brutal question, delivered with Emma's characteristic directness. My mother actually recoiled as if she'd been hit. I don't, he doesn't. But even as she tried to form a denial, I could see her mind working, probably connecting dots she'd been ignoring for years. My phone rang again. Dad's name, persistent as always. This time I answered. For days, Marcus, my father's voice came through the speaker, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm losing patience with this dramatic teenage rebellion. Dramatic? I looked around the room at my mother's tear-stained face, at Emma's shocked expression, at Uncle Dave's resigned anger. Dad, Mom's here. She just learned some interesting things about you. A pause. Your mother is where? At Uncle Dave's house. She came to apologize for throwing me out. Then we had a fascinating discussion about business partnerships and boats. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When my father spoke again, his voice had completely changed, low, controlled, dangerous. Put your mother on the phone. Now. I looked at Mom, whose face had gone white. She shook her head frantically. She doesn't want to talk to you right now, Dad. Apparently, she has some questions about your version of events versus reality. Marcus, you don't understand the complexities of adult relationships. I understand theft, I cut him off. I understand lies. I understand that you stole from your own brother, then told everyone he was jealous of your success. Emma was staring at me with something that might have been admiration. I'd never stood up to my father like this, had never challenged his carefully constructed narratives. You have 72 hours to come home, my father said, his voice ice cold now. After that, you're no longer my son. I haven't been your son since graduation night, I replied. When you told me to be grateful you fed me. I hung up before he could respond. The room was dead quiet except for the sound of my mother crying, not the delicate tears from earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere she'd been suppressing for years. 23 years, she whispered between sobs. 23 years of marriage, and I don't know who I'm married to. The years passed faster than I expected. College flew by in a blur of late-night study sessions, internships that actually paid thanks to Uncle Dave's connections, and slowly rebuilding my relationship with Emma, who stuck by me through everything. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer engineering and landed a job at a tech startup that was acquired by Google 2 years later. By 25, I was making $180,000 a year. By 30, I'd started my own software company. By 35, I'd sold it for $47 million. Uncle Dave kept every report card, every promotion announcement, every newspaper article about my company. I always knew you'd make something of yourself, he'd say, grinning like he'd personally built every success. Jennifer would roll her eyes and remind him that I'd done the actual work, but I could see the pride in both their faces. My parents never reached out. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even when the local paper ran a feature about my company being one of the top 30 under 30 businesses in the state. I'd hear occasional updates through relatives. Dad still worked at the bank, Mom still did part-time boutique work, they still took their twice-yearly cruises. The boat, apparently, had been repossessed 3 years after graduation when Dad couldn't keep up with the payments. I was 36, living in a house that made Uncle Dave's look modest, when my assistant buzzed me during a board meeting. Mr. Patterson. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman here who claims to be your mother. She says it's urgent. My mother stood in my office lobby looking every one of her 62 years. Her hair was more gray than brown now, her clothes looked worn rather than merely casual, and she clutched a beat-up purse with the desperate grip of someone holding on to their last possession. Hello, Marcus, she said quietly. You look successful. I gestured toward my office. What can I do for you, Mom? She sat across from my desk, the same way she'd sat in Uncle Dave's living room 18 years earlier, perched on the edge like she didn't belong. Your father's sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say he has maybe 3 months. I waited for her to continue, my face neutral. The medical bills are substantial. Our insurance doesn't cover experimental treatments. She opened her purse and pulled out a folder thick with medical documents. We've mortgaged the house twice. Sold everything we could. But it's not enough. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it. Cancer is terrible. Marcus, I know we don't have the right to ask, but... Her voice broke slightly. You're doing so well. The treatments might give him more time. Maybe enough time for us to fix things between us. I leaned back in my chair, looking at this woman who'd chosen her marriage over her child, who'd let me sleep in my car rather than stand up to her husband's twisted version of tough love. How much do you need? Hope flickered in her eyes. $200,000 for the full treatment protocol. We could arrange payments, put it in writing. Mom, I said gently, cutting her off. I want you to think back to graduation night. Do you remember what Dad said when I asked where I was supposed to go? Her face went pale. Marcus, please. He said it wasn't your concern anymore. When I begged to stay just until I could save enough for an apartment, do you remember what you told me? She was crying now, ugly tears that smeared her mascara. We were wrong. We were so wrong. You told me to figure it out. To build character. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city where I'd once slept in parking lots. You told me to be grateful you fed me for 18 years. We'll pay you back. With what? I turned back to face her. Dad's still at the bank, right? Still making his $120,000 a year. You're still working part-time because you want to, not because you have to. She nodded miserably. I walked back to my desk and pulled out my checkbook, writing carefully. When I finished, I tore it off and held it out to her. Here's what I'm going to do, Mom. I'm going to help you exactly the same way you helped me when I needed it most. She reached for the check with trembling hands, then stared at it in confusion. It was made out for exactly $0. Be grateful I wrote you a check at all, I said quietly. Now you can figure it out and build some character. She looked up at me with dawning horror. Marcus, your father is dying. And I'm supposed to care why? Because we're family. I sat back down, my voice calm and professional. You taught me that family doesn't owe each other anything. That 18 years of care creates no obligation. That real love is making people fend for themselves. Please, she whispered. I'll do anything. I'll leave him, I'll apologize publicly, You had 18 years to be my mother when it mattered, I said, pressing my intercom button. Sarah, could you please escort Mrs. Patterson out? She's finished here. As security walked her to the elevator, I heard her sobbing echo down the marble hallway. I felt nothing but the quiet satisfaction of a debt finally paid in full.